Let's talk about to brand or not to brand. So, should you focus on building a brand? Branding used to not matter much, but now it does. So what is a brand? You're like, if you don't really know what a brand is. So, a brand is just basically a name that becomes popular over time or that people get used to seeing. And the more they see it, the more they start to recognize it, and the more that name or word starts to have value. That's the easiest way to describe it. Large brands like Apple, McDonald's, Microsoft, Dell, Amazon, those are huge, valuable brands. Now, many people are going to come upon your marketing. Hopefully, many people that are going to give you their money and buy from you that have never heard of your brand or whatever you're calling your company or whatever your product names are. So, for those people, at first, it's not really going to make a difference or it doesn't seem to make a difference. However, for initial people that come into your marketing world, so to speak, and see your marketing materials and what it is that you have to sell, you want your product names and company name to have brand like capabilities to them. In other words, don't just use a generic company name like, you know, RP3, enterprises. And maybe you have three children, your name starts with R, your wife starts with P, and so you named it RP3 Enterprises. You need to now put a little bit more thought into any names that you use in your marketing, your company name, as well as your product names. Back in the day when internet marketing, when you almost couldn't go wrong by putting anything online and be able to get good results, people were doing products with all kinds of more keyword driven names where it was more like, um, you know, great dog training system and things like that. Well, the internet evolved away from those keyword names. A lot of people used to just use the keyword domains where it was like dog dash training dash techniques because Google used to rank high those keywords that, had, I'm sorry, those domains that had the keywords in them. Well, it's not the case anymore. So now what we're left with is every domain name is in the eyes of Google it are very similar. And so it comes down to everything else around it for how it ranks. Links coming in, authoritative content, content that's shared and curated, all kinds of different factors for that. But outside of that, and some keywords and in domains still matter a little bit, but not enough for you to put all your marketing focused into doing that is what I'm getting at. So you need to start really thinking about creating product names, coming up with names for the things that you do that make them seem like they're authoritative, like they belong to a large company. If you're going to go into the supplement market, for example, you don't necessarily want to use a benefit driven only name, which is like, you know, stop headaches now bottle of pills. Get your bottle of stop headaches now. You don't really want to use something that rather than something like, I don't know, headache stopper or headache plus or something that's more just seems more legit as a larger company would have. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. So you can increase your conversions the more you look like a large established company. And this is what I'm getting at. So having professional design, having speaking of design, back 5-10 years ago and more, ugly design used to work very well on the internet. If you've been in marketing for very long as a student and you've come across some of Dan Kennedy's old teachings, Dan Kennedy was always about it can be make it ugly, make it look like it was made in your basement. As far as selling like info products, make it look like it's just one person with this secret knowledge creating these things. You don't want it to be polished. You don't want it to look like it's something sold at a store. Well, that used to be the case many years ago, and that can still apply to certain markets. But most stuff on the internet now has gone in a completely different direction. Products, web design, interface design, everything looks more slick. It's more polished. It just looks more professional. It looks like it's coming from a larger company. And when it comes to doing business online, trust is a big deal. So if somebody looks at your stuff and they feel like they can trust you, that you're not just going to disappear overnight and take their money and run and not give them the product or give them support, they're more apt to do business with you. So anything that you can do related around making yourself look more like an established company, the better. And one of those things is using the right product name or company name. So again, consider coming up with a solid brand name for your company and product names. Don't just try to push in some keywords. even if you make up a name, like those are brands as well, right? Like let's take Xerox. Um, you know, Dell Computer. Dell happened to be the founder's last name. His name was Dell. But if you look at stuff like Microsoft, Intel, those are all names that were just kind of made up, and through a lot of marketing, a lot of business, were just turned into what people recognized and became popular. So don't be afraid to make up your own type of a name. Like if you've been in the internet marketing space for very long, you've probably heard of Kajabi, or Infusionsoft. These are just kind of made up brand names that have now over time built up value because people have seen them a lot, and they've just kind of gained a value as an asset because of that marketing that's behind it. So you want to do the same thing. You want to use a brandable domain instead of a keyword domain. I briefly touched on that. So you want to have like the Xerox.com or the something that is more like whatever your company name or your product name is, depending on the business, rather than it being stuffed with keywords. Again, the keyword type stuff is that's a previous generation of marketing that's now changing. The keyword domains don't have as much value anymore. And so when it comes to conversions, you looking like you're a more legit company is more valuable than you having a domain name stuffed with a bunch of keywords related to what it is that you're trying to market and sell. So if you look at some Google AdWords campaigns, again, spy for profit, we look and see what's in the marketplace. If you type in some keywords for like insurance companies or other big valuable markets where they pay a lot of money per click, look and see, in the bottom it shows their URL for their domain. You can see that they had these credible looking company names or site names. And people feel very comfortable clicking on those names and then ultimately doing business with those types of company names, because even if they're not world famous, they could be a company that started last month and those people just don't even know it. But it has that just kind of look and feel to the professionalism, and that's what you want. So check out brandbucket.com and brandroot.com. Now, if you're in the early stages of a new opportunity, you don't really need to do this just yet. But if you start building a business and you start making a lot of money where it's really doing well and you start, doing thousands of week in sales and you're excited about it, you really want to grow the business, really want to build out the business, then I highly recommend that you create a really nice professional brand name, and typically shorter is better. Get a 5 or 6 or 7 letter short.com name that kind of makes up like a made up word or phrase that you can establish as your brand, as your company. And that'll serve you very, very well, not only for people doing business with you, but for eventually being able to sell the business, which is always something you should potentially consider. So you could get a huge payout, maybe eventually of many millions of dollars. It happens all the time. But if you check out BrandBucket and BrandRoot, those are two of the biggest kind of domain resellers for short brandable domains. So it's not like camping.com and running.com, stuff like that. It's more like kind of Xerox, made up types of combinations of letters that you could use for your own brand. But last but not least, always do a trademark search at uspto.gov. The United States Patent and Trademark Office, they have one of the largest trademark databases in the world. So regardless of what market you're going to go into, most international companies establish and register a U.S. trademark because it's one of the biggest markets first, when they go to roll out a company or roll out a new product line. So obviously, I'm not an attorney. This course doesn't contain legal advice. But I would just suggest, this is what I do, I would suggest going to the uspto.gov and doing a trademark search on a name that you're thinking about using, just to make sure that hopefully no one else is using it and they may run into legal conflicts. Because a lot of times you'll think of a name, you're like, oh, this would be a great name for this weight loss supplement or what have you. And you'll go and look it up and you'll see someone actually has it trademarked or they recently filed to trademark it. And if that's the case, you don't want to use it because you can run into some legal problems. But what I always do is, the first thing I do is I do a search at USPTO to see if someone has a name that I'm thinking about using trademarked, whether it's a registered trademark or whether it was recently filed as a trademark that's about to become a registered trademark. And by the way, that's the difference when you see a brand name and you see the little TM on it. Anybody can put the TM on their name. That's just claiming it and saying, I'm trademarking this name. Anyone can claim a TM. But when you see the R with the circle around it, that means they actually filed an application with the USPTO It went through its process of 6 to 8 months. There were no objections to it, and it was approved. Then it becomes a registered trademark. So then it has a lot of value, and it's very powerful once it's registered. But anyone can claim something and put TM on it, although someone else could have claimed it before you, and it doesn't mean you have precedent over them. Anyways, that's a whole another discussion. You can do some Google searches on information about trademarks on your own. But go to the uspto.gov, search for the trademarks if anyone has a name you're thinking about using, and then hopefully if they don't, then go to Google and type that same product name within quotes, so it's the exact phrase. If it's obviously if it's one word, you don't need quotes, but if it's more than one word, put it within quotes and see who's using it on the internet. What social media accounts there are for it, how it's being used. But typically, even if it's being used or mentioned or it's the name of someone's blog or whatever else, it doesn't mean you can't use it, especially if you're doing business in what they call a class of goods, like a different area of business. So somebody has a product called Supermax Plus in the weight loss industry. It's possible to use Supermax Plus in the fishing market. So again, not an attorney, this isn't legal advice, but those are the types of guidelines basically for trademarks. But anyways, I want you to start thinking about building a brand, building something that over time people will recognize as a solid company name or a solid product name for what you're going to sell on the internet. Because that'll help with the conversions, it'll help you make more money, it gives you and your company credibility, and it also sets you up potentially to do an exit or to sell the business that you built for a lot of money.